Welcome to Curious Conversations, where we explore the power of curiosity and philanthropy and social change. I'm Marianne Fernandez, the founder of The Curious Philanthropist, an organization that helps people dream big about the positive impact they can make in the world. This is part two of my conversation with Dr. Paul Schervish, the founder and former director of the Center on Wealth and Philanthropy at Boston College, where his groundbreaking research has shaped how we understand the motivations, values, and inner lives of wealthy donors. We continue our discussion with what Paul has called the identification theory and how one's mobilizing experiences can be the key to meaningful philanthropy.
Marianne, I think the leading question, or let's put it less boldly, one of the leading questions of the 21st century is how do wealth holders use their resources for deeper purposes when they have solved the economic problem or have financial security indefinitely into the future for themselves and their heirs? What is the use of wealth as a tool for deeper purposes? And those set of deeper purposes can be some combination of business, investment, philanthropy, um, bequest to children,
Mm, mm,
inheritance.
mm,
Um, and the answer to those questions has a lot to do with what I call the identification model.
yes.
Is that something that you think we should talk about a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that would be great, especially because, every day in our communities, in the world, we see there's so much need. There are so many great causes. And
Yeah.
how as a donor, as a philanthropist, do you start to think about, you know, how does my curiosity serve me in identifying sort of what my passions are, what my interests are, what my curious questions are, and how does it align with the world's needs?
Um, so let's talk about how people who have moved toward the question of how do I organize or expand or um, do more traditional, I don't mean traditional things, but
Mm,
more in line with the traditional definition of philanthropy,
yeah.
contribution to um, the nonprofit or to civil society,
Mm,
that world. So we'll focus on that a little bit.
mm,
People often, and listen, you've read all the studies, you've seen it. It comes out in the Chronicle of Philanthropy every time there's a whisper about a new study on motivations.
mm,
We know all the motivations. Um, and what's interesting is so many of the studies give people a list of motivations to check off. So we once are getting a different order among different people
mm,
of established motivations. Now, I am suggesting these days a different term,
mm,
a term I call mobilizing experiences.
mm,
You notice this isn't a motive to take care of this particular cause or people, but it's what experiences have we had, perhaps from our childhood, that have been building. Now, we talked about hyperagency. From the time a little kid puts the first Tinker toy together or Legos, they're being world builders or makes friends, a set of friends in school, or gets a first car or a first job, or um, takes a vacation with their friends and builds the plan for that, um, or tries to build a wonderful early young family. or to have a graduation party. All those are world building. And we know about that from when we're kids. And we know gradually where we're constrained in doing that and where we have more empowerment to do that. And as people become wealthier, they have more worldly empowerment to do more entrepreneurial or to support existing causes and purposes.
Mm.
Well, the mobilizing experience that I want to suggest is going back to what I said about the parent-child relationship. Aristotle says what we first do is identify with that other person, that child, the one I have mutual nourishment with or friendship love with. Aristotle says a friend is another myself. Notice that.
Yeah.
So, what we have done from the time we are young is experience, not just be told, experience the people, the causes, the purposes with which we identify as if they were ourselves, our own children, our family, our dear ones. And so I suggest that one of the great questions that people need to ask is the question of where have I been, where am I now, and where do I want to be in response to identifying with the fate of others. Who are these people and causes? What can I do to help meet their true needs? And what experiments I want to take? And what is the area of focus that I identify with? That is my passion, not somebody else's. Not what somebody else is telling me to do, not what the scolding model is telling me to do, not what guilt is telling me to do. The most insightful Jesuit spiritual director, I'll mention his name, some may know him, Howard Gray.
Mm.
He insisted that the will of God is not found in what the church teaches you, in what others demand of you, in what guilt tells you what to do, in what your neighbors or even your parents tell you what to do at a certain age, but in what inspires you. So, in this model, the question is, how do I figure out what inspires me? And what inspires people, and when they're looking for their inspiration, is explore your identifications. And you'll notice they may have to do with the identification of your spouse being in this hospital or in this hospice that so dearly took care of them. Or it may be, like in my case, this isn't a philanthropy I worked on, but with greater resources, um, I am very grateful that somebody did. When my mother died young from Hodgkin's disease, they found the cure 6 months later in the late 60s. And so I might, had I the resources, explored that. Now, somebody would say, oh, that's selfish. That's self-centered. But I want to say inspiration is neither altruistic nor selfish. What I mean by it's not altruistic, it isn't just doing what others demand. It isn't making yourself into this self-sacrificing victim that's going to toe the line for other people's purposes. And it's not selfish. Notice in friendship love, It is neither. You are inspired to help where you identify, and you are fulfilled. It's not just self-interest. It's not the absence of self, nor is it selfishness. It's a quality of self. And Marianne, what's the quality of self? It's the quality of identification. Other people may say, where are your connections? Deep in your heart from your experience. Now, one
Yeah.
closing the gap in your inspiration about your identifications between where you are and where you want to be, closing that gap brings greater happiness to others and to yourself simultaneously. That's the project of life.
It's interesting. When you talk about self-identification, and a lot of it is, a lot of people give to things that are part of their story. So you talk about a sick family member, someone who died, maybe died of cancer. A lot of families give to cancer research,
To autism research, to
autism, or whatever. And it's funny because I use a set of questions, sort of in my advisory, and I'd shared them with you before about, and two of them are, what do you love? What makes you angry? And the last one is, what's part of your story? So it's almost like lots of different ways at getting at that self-identification. One of the things that is so interesting to me, because that I am big on getting out into the field. Don't sit at home, don't sit in front of your computer. Go out, meet your potential partners, explore these issue areas, talk to people, build relationships. And I feel like um, being able to explore on that level all of a sudden brings what might have been separate from you to become a little bit closer to part of you, part of your
but
story, part of your
no,
identification.
no guilt if you are inspired by something in your story. Let's
Mm,
say you are poor. Uh, one of the things that happened to me, and this is something that we do, my wife and
mm,
I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, and we struggled a little bit. And um, I eventually was able to get into the Jesuit high school. My mother thought that was a good idea,
mm,
but we didn't have the money for the tuition, but it was so low because at that high school, the University of Detroit High School, there were 35 Jesuits
mm.
in there, from driving the school buses to coaching to teaching. And so the tuition was very low, and I could make it caddying in the summer. What we do now is there's a Jesuit inner city, one of the four Catholic grade schools that are left, uh, with our connection to the Jesuits through my teaching at Boston College and our educations. We support an inner city Jesuit grade school that anchors a part of Detroit to help them do whatever they want with that gift. And right now, they're using it to help build their administrative staffs for fundraising. And for us, that's as good as what we used to do to help them with their STEM program or to help them with scholarships. But when they said this is what we really need, we were able to do it. Now, we're not bragging. What we're saying is our inspiration even shifted, but it shifted from this Jesuit high school
Mm.
to this Jesuit grade school. Now, why? Well, we can make more of an impact there, something that other
Yeah.
people weren't doing. And we're very happy to do it. Now, is that selfish? That was my Detroit. It was the neighboring parish. It's where a lot of my friends and a lot of my sister's friends went to grade school and became our lifelong friends and fed the Jesuit high school and the girls' Catholic school a mile away. So there is this inclination model that summarizes a lot of this. If you want to get to the question, I've already said, how do I use my wealth as a tool for deeper purposes? Then how do we specify that through discernment? Well,
Mm,
identification is one.
mm,
Another mobilizing experience is gratitude. We won't go into that,
mm.
but um, it's a major thing in people's lives.
Yes.
Um, what are we grateful for? How have we been blessed? We call it luck, breaks, blessing, grace, whatever we call it. We all know we're imbued with that, in addition to our own efforts and merits and virtues.
Mm.
So the ultimate kind of way to maybe put this is, what is it that I would like to do that I can do better through philanthropy or civil society or even uh, a for-profit firm
Mhm.
better than, let's say, Uncle Sam can do? Something that meets the true needs of others. Notice the inclination, something that I would like to do. I'm inspired to do. Meets the true needs of others. That enables me to identify with these people and causes as if they were my own family, or
Mm.
that expresses my blessing, my gratitude for blessing, and enables me to achieve simultaneously greater happiness for myself and others at the same. Now that is the question that we're discerning.
You've just characterized this, how rich a philanthropic journey can be.
And
It's
notice
the
all this with curiosity.
Yeah,
I keep repeating these questions. And one more thing, Marianne,
yeah.
this is the first time in history this is happening, so we have to experiment. Don't
Okay.
have all the answers that people have that are trying to sell a book
Mm,
or get on TV. There's too much punishment, criticism of other people's inspirations. You can argue, but you don't reject. This is what we're saying about all of our politics today.
mm,
And notice how everything that takes place in our divisive politics and divisive financial worlds and economic arguments shows up in the arguments about philanthropy and what you ought to do. And so, interestingly enough, what we think may be the end of one of the last questions we're asking in life or in business or with our wealth really can be one of the generative questions for our whole life. Bring back the answers and the new attitudes that you get by discovering and searching with the liberation of questioning and curiosity.
mm,
In Pema Children, the Buddhist nun says, when you are depressed or hurt or even joyful, when you have griefs and sorrows and pains and suffering and happinesses, be curious about them.
mm.
She even teaches me, what about the afterlife? Well, you know what I say? I'm curious. I'm curious. That means I'm digging deeper,
Yeah,
but nobody's going to tell me the answer, and I'm going to be open to the answers.
I love that. And I think that's what it is. It's about feeling liberated enough to ask the questions and being open enough to just exploring and see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, you and I could talk for a long time, but I'm going to ask you one more question. So, what question should donors be asking themselves, but don't?
How is the guilt or the pressure or the ideology that is ruling my life is hurting me, is adding to my suffering? How do I make or think that a lot of things that are really bad for me, hurt me, destroy me? How are so many of those things we consider to be light or good? As I said before, we consider this poison to be milk. And so a question we fail to ask, is how is all of that self-denigration or cultural denigration of me that I accept and impose on others really hurtful rather than positive? We live with it, we get used to it, we think it's good for us, we think it's good for the world, we think it's good for others, but it just creates suffering in myself and others. So the other question, the obverse of that,
Mm.
is what the Buddhists call, how do I find Maitri? Maitri,
Mm.
loving compassion for myself and others simultaneously. And that's a question that we are on the verge of asking. We're not sheep without a shepherd. We have instincts about this. We know that these oppressive ideologies and hatreds, we kind of know that's the wrong question to glorify and to live out. And we kind of know that how do we live a happier life for ourselves and others with some liberty?
Mm. Mm.
We kind of already know if we would give ourselves the permissions and do some work on self. See, we too often think that work on self is selfish and we ought to be working on society. False question. So I would say that's the other part that we're missing is we make into a false question working on self versus helping others. We think of working on self as too individualistic, as too selfish, but it isn't. It's a prerequisite for doing the other well.
I love that.
Thomas Aquinas asks, what's more important? Friendship, love with God, friendship, love with your neighbor, or friendship, love with yourself? I usually get an answer when I ask that. And one will say neighbor,
Mm.
and once in a while somebody will say self. But according to Thomas Aquinas, it's the unity of love of neighbor, love of God, or ultimate truth and love of neighbor. It's the unity of all those three. And that's our question. And that's what we need to look at. No bashfulness of finding your inspiration, about finding your inspiration, about being inquisitive,
Mm.
about unpacking this. And what was that word we used way at the beginning about curiosity? It,
And
unsh-
shackling.
it unshackles. What a delightful way to live, you know?
Mm.
Let our work on philanthropy and wealth be a whole work on our entire life.
It's so good to talk with you. Thank you so much for giving us So many great questions, so many great insights, and I hope we get a chance to do it again.
Marianne, it's been not only a delight, it fulfills me. Admit it.
Me
And
too.
this is a set of approaches that is very rich, and I wish you the very best, my good friend.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
So here are a couple of takeaways from part 2 of my conversation with Paul Schervish. First, gratitude. What is it that meets the true needs of others that enables me to express my gratitude? Second, don't be bashful about seeking your inspiration. In a world that often demands quick answers, take time to explore and reflect. And lastly, when thinking about which issue areas or organizations to give to, start with issues that are part of your story, things that you can identify with. It's that connection that will give you an issue or an organization that provides meaningful impact, meaningful to the beneficiaries and to you as the giver. Thank you again for joining us for this wonderful conversation.